I'm really excited about tonight's video, but I wanted to explain a couple of things before we get started. So I had this great long conversation with Dr. Rimka all about carnivore and health and weight loss and brain health and so on. But the conversation ended up getting really long. We talked for like 2 hours. So what I'm going to do is split the interview in half, and we're going to do one portion tonight and the next portion next week. The other thing is we dove right away into lots of really interesting concepts, but we didn't start with, what is the carnivore diet and why is it helpful? So we didn't dive into that until halfway through the conversation. So I decided to play the second half of the conversation first because I think it gives a good foundation for what is carnivore. And then and next week I will play the second part where we talk more specifically about fasting and the carnivore lifestyle, the protein sparing modified fast, and other biohacking type things that I think are interesting, but maybe a little bit confusing for the beginner. So without further ado, let's just dive right into the interview. What is a paleo versus a keto versus a carnivore diet? And which is better? And can people go straight from, the standard American diet to carnivore? Do they have to go through these stages? What would you say?
Well, what is better is eating, a seasonal, at a bare minimum. One, it's going to be whatever you can sustain, right? So whatever is keeping you from Dairy Queen and pizza and cornbread and processed junk. The recent study came out that did a meta-analysis, and 2/3 of all American children, their calories, their diet is processed junk food. 2/3 of the diet. I mean, for our children, like, it's really getting out of control how much we don't eat proper human foods. It's all processed junk. So overall, for looking for health, paleo is a bare minimum to come in. So there's been a lot of modern kind of bastardization of paleo as far as I'm concerned, and it's gotten people kind of junk foodie, and they'll eat copious amounts of things that have gotten really dangerous in the paleo community for me. For example, spinach, kale, almonds, like chia or whatever, and they'll eat insane fistfuls amounts in a Vitamix and have smoothies 2-3 times a day. Oh, but it's paleo. Or they use copious amounts of honey and maple syrup, but it's paleo. So they'll still be diabetic. They'll still have blood sugar issues. They'll still be inflamed. They'll have tremendous plant toxins, oxalates and lectins and phytates. So they can be still, it's an improvement from a standard American diet at first. But if you're eating only 10 different foods, and it's like spinach, almonds, chicken breast, hamburger, blueberries, and a lot of fruit, and they make a lot of desserts. They love, the paleo community seems to like a paleo dessert like nobody's business. I'm just, what I'm talking about.
Loves desserts.
Yeah. So there's lots
of problem everywhere.
It's a problem. Now, again, is a paleo birthday cake better for your kid than the other thing? Yes. So please hear that. And there's great paleo little cookbooks to get kids involved in actually making food with you. That's really good. So of course they're using some honey.
Well, would you say a cake made of almond flour is better than a cake made of regular flour? I mean, the oxalates and load in one is going to be higher than the other.
I would, because of what gluten and gliadin in general, I think those are worse poisons. And I think because the system, there's so much glyphosate in there, and because of so much autism spectrum disorder, and that destroys those guts. It'll make that kid, they can start stimming within a few hours, and the almond won't do that. So yeah, I do think there's a difference for especially children with attention deficit, spectrum disorders. You'll see now, should they eat that every day? No, but it won't impact them neurologically the same. as
And
gluten.
how about for the adult who eats the whole cake every day?
Yeah. Well,
That's what I would have done.
gluten is more addictive than almonds. I mean, that's for sure. So it's not natural to grind up a bunch of almonds, make a cake, but gluten is more addictive, and it will trigger a genetic trigger if you have a gluten issue for 6 to 10 weeks. And so if you have an addiction or obsessive compulsive issue, it's gonna do that the whole time. The almond won't do that. So there is a little bit of a difference, right? It's not just what's in the thing, it's what's it going to do to your gene code, how long it's going to take, what's that going to trigger, if it triggers depression in you and you become now depressed, inflamed, and suicidal for the next 4 to 6 weeks. That's a very real thing with gluten. That doesn't happen the same with almonds for most people. Okay. So paleo would be animals and no grains, but fruits and vegetables, honey, maple syrup. To me, everything should be in season and local. As soon as you put that caveat on paleo, it suddenly becomes more primal and it becomes healthier. And many of my patients can stay there for a very, very long time. In my perfect world, none of my patients buy anything that ever requires you reading a label. If you never need to read a label, chances are what you're eating is like the way you're eating is pretty good, right? That means you're never buying something that everything's fresh. There's nothing to read. So I don't care if you're paleo, keto, low carb, carnivore, read no labels and you're doing really, really well, right? It's a very different thing than doing any of those where you're having to read labels, because it's the level of processing is completely different in those diets, right? So low carb would be, keto is when we're really trying to take you ketogenic and we have to have a certain amount of fat going in there and I need to get that body in ketosis, and we're going to measure things. And so things like epilepsy, seizure disorders, Alzheimer's, traumatic brain injury, brain cancer, tumors, I will need to track, are we in deep ketosis? And we will really have to pay attention and use that diet very medicinally, and how much fat you eat there. That tracking's involved, but we're dealing with a different issue, right? And so in general, people consider it's higher fat, and you can eat vegetables or fruit. You can eat whatever you can eat that keeps you in ketosis. So I don't buy that it's 80 this percent. No, it's not. I can only eat 10 carbs and be in ketosis. I go out to dinner with a guy, he's eating 100 carbs that day and his asshole is still in ketosis. I eat half avocado and I'm kicked out. But I'm a woman and he's a man. I'm 45, he's 30. He works out 3 hours a day. I do nothing. Well, he can eat 100 carbs and he's still in ketosis. I'm not. So it's whatever your body does. So that one's a little bit of whatever. Carnivore, still you go in and out of ketosis all the time. Carnivore is eating just animal-based foods, no plants, and there's ranges in there. Coffee is a plant. A lot of us are doing coffee and tea, a little bit of plant in there. Dairy is on the edge of some people, do we consider milk, cheese? Some people do well with it, some people don't. It's pretty pro-inflammatory. I have a lot of people off dairy that have different immune disorders. I take them off anyway. We might be able to reintroduce raw milk because that's a primal real food versus when pasteurized and homogenized and what's been done to it. So yeah. But all of those are relatively animal-based. They should be. I don't care. Any of those can be healthy as long as you're hitting your protein. So to me, we're prioritizing protein. I want at a bare minimum 0.8 gram per kilogram body mass up to 1.5 depending. But in general, a target range for people is if you have a gram of protein a day for what you want to weigh. You want to weigh 125 pounds, you need to eat 125 grams of protein. You want to, if you're you want to weigh, so if you're 300 pounds and you want to be 150, you need to eat 150 grams of protein. You need to eat for what you want to be, and you'll start to lose weight. If you're trying to gain weight, right? You're in the gym. My son wants to gain more muscle, build testosterone. I'm like, what matters most is protein. Hit protein. I want them to eat all the protein on their plate first. I don't care where I am. Eat every piece of that animal, and the protein better be animal protein. I'm sorry, I don't count plant protein. Take your pea protein and shove it down a toilet somewhere. So that's, you know, I don't, none of that counts to me when I'm tracking protein for them. That's a carb. So eat all of the protein. Then you can, if you want to have any vegetable carbs, and carbs I call like low carbs, non-starchy things. And then I call sugars, starches, and fruits, and alcohol, right? That's a sugar to me. Dairy is kind of somewhere in the middle, depending on what we're doing, but I don't even count dairy as my protein. I'm like, no, this isn't about having a grilled, like a bunch of cheese, right? Like I want meat and fish, organs. So any of those can be healthy, right? If they're prioritizing the protein, even my paleo people, they're going to naturally, they're not going to have as much filler, right? Because the protein is what's satiating. It makes you be satisfied. The human system is looking for protein, and it's going to continue to eat until it hits that protein nitrogen threshold that it needs. And it doesn't get it from pizza. It doesn't get it from fries. It doesn't get it from ice cream. It doesn't get it from cakes. It doesn't get it from rice. And it's not in potatoes. It's not in your salad. It's not in your quinoa. It's not in your lentils. So it will keep eating and keep eating and keep eating and keep eating until it hits that protein nitrogen threshold that it desperately needs. That's why people are overeating. They're starving to hit the protein. You hit the protein and you're like, you know, you're like, I just can't eat anymore. I mean, I know I put those mashed potatoes on my plate, but I just don't want them. You might have 2 bites. You know what I mean? So what an improvement. You know, yep, that's still paleo, but they've had 2-3 bites of sweet potatoes instead of this massive 1/3 of the plate. So that's where I like people to be. Do I think people going from standard American diet to carnivore? I don't like it. I do think the detox, the candida die off, the fungal die, I think it can be so uncomfortable. I prefer to do a gradual titration to get people, so we don't go, my patients don't need to go through that keto flu stuff. We don't need a Herxheimer reaction. We don't need die-off reactions. Why would I want to auto-intoxicate you? Why would I want to let your electrolytes become, you don't need to go through 2-3 weeks of hell. And especially, again, intestinal infection die-off can be dangerous, very, very dangerous. So most of these people who are carb addicts, they have candida overgrowth. They have gut dysbiosis. When you start starving those bugs, they go to war with you, and they're going to release biotoxins and nuclear bombs inside of your colon, which go to your brain and make you feel like you're an absolute lunatic, and you will do irrational things to get that sugar to feed them. Right?
Well, I for sure went through that. Like I used
Wow.
to get chronic yeast infections, and even on keto, like I always would get, you know, my doctor to give me diflucan and stuff, so I'd have it on hand. And then I went on carnivore, and I never had one again.
That's awesome.
But even you know, a couple of years, 5 years of keto, or I don't know, maybe it was like 3 years of keto, was not enough to break that systemic, whatever it was, yeast infection or whatever. But just, you know, a week or 2 of carnivore, and it's just gone over.
That's awesome. Yeah.
But
there's a lot of that that happens. Yep.
But the
But imagine if you had not done that and tried to just diet off. I don't like that approach. I really, I think, some men can get away with it. I'm going to tell you, some men and women's physics, it's different, right? We got a whole lot of different, we got extra flora to deal with, and we have the weekly cycles. If you're still cycling, if you're an ovulating woman, you have 4 unique weeks. You're very different hormonally. Your appetite is different. Your metabolism is different. Your physical endurance and strength are different in all of these weeks. Every athletic coach knows this. I mean, I wish girls and women could compete based upon their cycle. Like, look, that's my week. I don't want to, it's not fair, because you actually have some women coming in, well, she's going to win that competition of where she is in her cycle because she's physically stronger. It's her strongest time of the month. This is her weakest time of the month. Damn. And they're doing a bench press thing. You know, it's a really shitty thing. Men have none of that. They have none of that variation. They don't have the propensity towards yeast infections like we do, and things like that. They don't have the same cravings for sugar that we do, because we're seeking vitamin C. We need way more C than men do. They need way more zinc than we do. So they typically crave salty things. So there's a lot of reasons for it. So women in general, and they're often the mothers and the family coordinators and the carpool drivers. So I don't need to add more stress and hell to her life if I could say, well, let's just do this over a 3-month period instead of trying to put her in a 2 to 3 week hell period. She's probably not going to sustain it, because she's got the husband and the kids and the appointments and the get up and the go. I'm a mom. It's hard. So imagine if you're flu-like for day, you're like, I can't function like this, because I got to get my kid to speech therapy. I got to get my this. I got to, they don't have any help. So that's why I don't like it. I don't want to set people up to fail, because I want this to be a long-term lifestyle change. And if we come at it and they're bruised and beaten up and it's hell, how am I going to convince them to do it again? So I like slow and go. This is a marathon, not a sprint. So I prefer to do an easy transition. Some people can jump without parachutes. I'm that kind of a person. I can be really aggressive. I can tolerate high discomfort. Not everybody can do that. So you have to know the person. You have to know yourself. But in general, I think most people do better with a slow transition. It's not dangerous. It's not dangerous per se, but except for those infections and the die-off, that can be really uncomfortable. And if they don't have some support and some binders and some situation in there, it can get a little ugly for them.
Yeah. Well, when I first went into ketosis the first time, from years before when I had done Atkins, but that first time in 2015, the first week, I really did feel like, an addict coming off heroin. I would just be sitting at my desk all afternoon, like clutching the arms of my desk saying, I'm not going to get M&Ms. I'm not going to get M&Ms. I'm not going to do it. But I felt like it took a good 6 weeks before I didn't think about M&Ms every other second of the day. Oh. And so I feel like, that fat adaptation or whatever was happening, like it definitely took time. Like I was in ketosis after the first week, but like for me to be like solidly in it and doing well with it and having the appetite, having the energy and the brain fog lifting and all that kind of stuff, it took a while. Yeah. So I do try to, kind of give people who've never been in ketosis, like, you're going to have to really trust and lean into this, because it's, it's a process.
It is a process. And I think if people, we set good expectations, and chances are, one of those moments for you back then, you could look at it now, years ago, whatever, the majority of these problems, it's salt. It's usually like, had we added more of that, you might have been stunned, or like a number that seems obscene, like, because I even have been doing this a long time, and I'm surprised how much salt I'm actually taking in now. And I didn't want to tell people to buy supplements, electrolytes. I was like, just salt your food and let's not make this rocket science. But I've been adding a lot more minerals and electrolytes to my daily thing, like 3-4 times a day. I think I feel so much better. And I think it really does come down to, we're not, drinking blood like the Maasai and everything else like that. When you see that they drink blood with milk, the goat, you're like, really? And it's like, yeah, I get it. Like the amount of, how much I don't make bone broth as much as I should. I realize like that's where all the minerals are. So as I've been adding a lot more salt, and I've an experience faster, I could, if somebody said, I need you to fast for 5 days starting tomorrow, I'd say, okay. I wouldn't need to mentally prepare. I wouldn't be overwhelmed by it. I wouldn't change anything in my schedule. I doubt I would even get a headache. I'd have that third day of like, I'm kind of really hungry, but I'm gonna go do something else. That's where I would be. I wouldn't have any sleep problems. It would be very rare, right? And that being said, I still need a whole lot more salt than I even realize, So I bet with them, it's like, I do that. I do the little packets of Element now. I try to stay away from packaged stuff, but they're so delicious. Like, and like, so I can get 2 to 3, sometimes 4, and I do Quinton mineralization. I use Quinton plasma water. So I get all my patients on a lot of minerals now, more than I used to a couple of years ago. So I think I even underestimated how much minerals and salts were, and they're the same thing, how critical they really were, because that's what it's electrolyte, electricity. It's what makes the electricity I talked about. It's what makes you have life. And going low carb, all that water retention, we don't retain water. That's why we're not puffy. That's why we look good, right? We don't have that puffy, bloated look, but all that puffy bloat that people have, it's salts. And so that's why people, you hear going to say like, no, you have to have probably more salt than you realize, and pinching under the tongue you have a craving for those M&Ms, salt under the tongue. You have a craving for salt under the tongue, piece of bacon. That's the only time I allow snacking, is in the transition. I'm like, you can snack on bacon as much as you want. Just eat some bacon and have some salt, and to help calm those cravings down. Because I can usually get rid of it in much faster than 6 weeks for patients now. And you can use a few little plant medicines to help the liver make a lot more ketones. Because if you had more beta hydroxybutyrate really floating through your brain would have been like, oh,
I don't think I was having a lot of beef. I probably, was having big salads with some chicken in it, and turkey in it. And also,
and you were having die-off. You were having yeast die-off. That's what you were definitely, the bugs were making you crave. Yeah.
Yeah. And I used to also every day at 3 o'clock, like I had to go get salty peanuts, and I would end up eating. I would always say I'm not going to get them, and then I had to get them. And I realized now that was salt that I was looking for, and that made the difference for me. Like I couldn't seem to get through without that.
Yeah.
So you're
like me. I think I crave the same things. I like peanuts and chocolate peanut and M&Ms.
Yeah.
Snickers. I like that peanut thing, and I'm like, it's so bad for you. And so much mold. I ended up with mold sickness a few years ago. So I'm really cognizant of mold now, and very good at chelating that out of people. But I'm like, damn, I love peanut butter and peanuts and chocolate, Reese's, right?
Yeah.
I don't like all that, right? And you realize, well, I don't like feeling bad more than I like the way something tastes in my mouth. So I really don't like being sick. So I think when it comes down to, say, somebody like you or me, whether it's been you were really sick or you were severely obese and now you're not, you're in pain and now you feel better, it does give you great perspective to go, it's not worth it. And I think that's why so many people, when they are really sick and they turn to carnivore and they get better, and why some people say, aren't you bored? Am I bored? No. You know what I mean? Because first of all, the food is delicious, and I'm living a vibrant life doing things I never thought I could do. I've had patients come out of wheelchairs doing this. They've gone from explosive diarrhea 20 times a day and never being with Crohn's or ulcerative. Can't vacation, can't travel, always stressed. Just driving to work is like a war zone of where the bathroom's going to be. I hope I don't crap my pants. That is no way to live for a 23-year-old beautiful girl who's told you're never going to have, be off drugs and this is the rest of your life. Really? Because a few months with me and she's in total remission, completely, it's all gone. And she's gotten vacations and traveling with her fiance. That's like, what does she miss about a plant? Not a damn thing. There is no salad worth the pain she was going through. Most people are just eating that stuff, as because they think they're supposed to. Like, I'm like, do you really like broccoli, or is it because you've made yourself think you like broccoli? That's what it really comes down to.
Well, I knew that for when I made salads, I always had to use a specific balsamic vinaigrette. So when I went carnivore, it was like, it wasn't the salad, it was that sugary balsamic vinaigrette that I wanted.
Yeah. That's like a Caesar salad. And what is it? It's like, it's all the cheesy anchovy, cheesy, creamy thing. That's really,
Ken's Caesar salad dressing. That was another good one. But yeah, I don't miss any of that though. I
No,
mean, people ask me and it's like, are you kidding me? A Brussels sprout versus a ribeye?
yeah, yeah.
So
It
no.
really comes down to, for me, as we kind of started with how are we going to help more people understand this? And my frustration when I see, so I'm in Atlanta, and when you go to any health food store here, I'm in the city, so it's very, metropolitan kind of way of living, and Whole Foods. I'm always stunned with when I'm in there. I'm like, it's like almost all Black people in here, and like they're all like heavy, and lots of like Rastafarian, like that too going on, and all with their juices and their smoothie and their salad. Right. And you kind of look at the whole thing, and I've been seeing it for years. I'm like, it's really interesting, because I'm like, this place is like crazy expensive. And what's the deal with that? And like the food co-op I was in for many years, a little grocery store, vegetarian grocery store, because I was a vegan for a long time. So you pay every month, almost all Black, you know? And I'm like, it's a very strong movement.
Why do you
Among
think we're going vegan faster? Because I read that 8% or it's rising much faster in the Black community than it is in the white community.
See, I didn't know the stat. I've just observed it, and it's really
Yeah,
interesting. So, I'm in the brown.
8% versus 5%, which is a significant difference.
That is very significant. And I
Yeah.
don't quite exactly have the answer, other than, I mean, it is cheaper, technically-ish. It's very interesting, because in general, people of color usually are much more skeptical of the Western medical model, especially here in America, knowing the lies, knowing what was done to Native American, what were done to brown people, and all the forced, hysterectomies, lied to the Tuskegee, experiments, lying to those men. And so in general, there's more skepticism of Western medicine, and mistrust. And so I don't understand exactly the acceptance of the plant thing. Now, Dr. Sebi was real big, Sebi, or like he was, he's the one I hear.
He's still, I mean, not alive.
I think that's
still
what it is. I know he's not alive. I think that might be one of the big things. And then as influential people do it, you know, Black culture definitely likes to look to its successful leaders and whatever they're doing, and kind of create its own subculture, since you can't look at the culture of white culture. Like there's no, don't do that. Like, what are they doing? And a lot are going that way. Like it's becoming incredibly popular. I think it's a very sad travesty. It's the same that's happened to, so I'm mixed. I mean, I'm Black, white, and Indian, and brown people over in India, where my mom is from, same kind of thing has happened to that. So you basically just have a forced, the same way Black folk are taking the names like Washington and Jackson, they were given those names. Their culture was stolen. Our history was stolen. So the colonization came into India and said, this is how you're going to do it. And we're getting rid of all of your things, and you're going to do the way we do. They perverted their sacred texts and told them they were vegetarian. They were not naturally vegetarian. And they did that, and they were able to weaken them, and they came and conquered. There's a whole history of this, is how it was done in India. The same was done to me with shipping Black people over to other countries as slaves. Now you've totally taken away what they were doing primally. So I don't know what it's going to take for people to say, is this what any of your ancestors 50,000 years ago would have been doing? One, you already
they're saying yes, it is. I've
not.
seen people who are saying that we are naturally fruitarians, that humans, and that humans,
I don't.
Well, we evolved from, primates who were vegetarian, and I mean, I'm just telling you what they're saying, and
okay. Well,
yeah.
Okay. Well, so that evolution from a chimp thing is a theory. People need to understand too, theories are not fact. So that is a theory. And yet, even if you believe in that theory, which I do not, we're incredibly different from them. We have completely different digestive systems than them. Like people need to understand what a gorilla is doing inside of its intestine, what a cow can do inside their intestine. We aren't able to do. We cannot eat leaves and grass. They have bugs inside of them that convert that into medium chain fatty acids. They are eating a ketogenic diet. They're highly ketogenic, highly fat adapted. If we had that capability of chewing grass and leaves and could sustain life that way, great. We should do it. I mean, we can't. We can do nothing with that and except poop it out. And along the journey of that, it's going to cut us up inside. It's going to cause lacerations in your colon because we're so ill-equipped to handle it. So unfortunately, it's a lot. So just like the lies came from medicine that cholesterol causes heart disease, when it was sugar that does it, they literally paid, 2 Harvard scientists were paid off. We know it now to do that. It's been a corrupt industry. Ansel Keys lied about his data. All of this stuff was, so the whole heart disease, cholesterol, saturated fat lie, so the whole statin thing, lie. There's tons of lies. I mean, look at what the stuff medicine has come up with. I mean, your people were disease ridden and should never sit in the same toilet as, I don't know where I would have passed along this. One of my great people, my mother had to go to the dark fountain. I mean, my family's all very confused, but my son said once, so where, if he was learning, he's like, so where would I'm like, baby, you would have been able to go to the white fountain. I said, I would be somewhere, I don't know, in the middle. Grandma cannot. You understand that, right? And he's like, right. Like, but it's for a kid. He's like, I don't get it. I'm like, nobody gets it, honey. So if people are so wackadoodle that they think you peeing on the same toilet as a white person is going to get the white person sick with an infectious disease. I mean, this is the wackadoodle science and the
Yet
lies.
at the same time, they have us prepare their meals. It's like,
right?
Where do you think that's happening?
Like the whole thing is just, it's no fact. So unfortunately, trying to overcome, and they teach you in school, a bunch of slaves built the pyramids as tombs. Ain't found a mummy inside one yet they keep telling the same lies over and over again. Christopher Columbus, but he was a good guy and discovered America, right? Like, I know that's starting to change in school, but that's what I was taught. I didn't find out till much later about what really went down. So there is a lot of having to rethink what you were taught in school. Most of it are lies, and it was done for a certain way, and it is what it is. And what you're being taught is designed to keep you weak. And so, no, we are very clear on the anthropological evidence. All humans on this earth are in a 70 to 100% animal-based diet. There has been there's no culture that's ever been a vegetarian naturally, never has existed. There's certainly been no vegans. All of that came along when religion came along and colonization and subjugation and slavery came. That's where it came from. You want to weaken a group of people, you take away their protein, you take away their meat. Look at North Korea. You take away people's protein and you completely weaken and cripple them, and they are very easy to conquer. Mm-hmm. That's how it is. And right, they have no muscle mass, they have no hormones, they're starving, and if they don't have access to food, they'll look frail and anorexic, they'll look extremely thin, they won't grow. That's North Korea. They'll look like Holocaust victims. They don't look good. Now, if they have access to a ton of food, crap food, they're going to get obese. Welcome to modern day America, especially in the dark communities. Everyone's huge. It's not lack of food, but they're still starving. Their cells are starving because they have access to a ton of cheap seed oils and sugar concoctions with 8,000 chemical ingredients, but they're starving for protein. And so you have layers of miseducation, misinformation, poor, horrible healthcare system, a lack of knowing what to do. And you do have the socioeconomic class systems of coming in to be like, and the initial reaction, like, how am I going to afford to do that? You got a mom with 4 kids, and that was my mom, raising us alone, and still, we had Medicaid and food stamps, and she's still busting her ass to try and figure out how to, this was back in the day, but still, I'd look at that like, how am I going to do that? So when I have patients and I try to tell them, they just start adding in stuff because it's filler, because they can't afford, they don't know how to get enough meat to keep them satisfied. So they start adding in the rice and potatoes, you know, like, so I get it. And so when I try to come up with cheap ways, so I think there's a big part of that, of like figuring out how are we going to do this financially, in addition to how it's been set up with segregation of, there's, you know, food, there's no grocery stores, there's no access to things. There's nothing there, you know, in the neighborhoods, in the poor neighborhoods. Plus there's way more stress, you know, when you're money scarce and food scarce and job scarce and crime is high and services are low, and there's, you know, lead poisoning in your water. Hello, Flint, Michigan, and 1,500 other municipalities on this country. How are people supposed to get out of that? It's a very tough thing. So somebody comes, oh, eat more, become a vegetarian. They're so poisoned with lead, they can't even make a rational argument against. It's very easy to tell them what to do. So it's a very, very sad situation. And I don't, you know the answer, but I think the more kind of libertarian and resistance defiance we can get Black and brown communities to kind of rise up and go, wait a minute, you need to be questioning them, and you need to keep getting yourself strong, because the first people they're coming after are you, period. That's historic. I don't think it's going to change. So we've been in a crisis for a year and a half, and this is, to me, not the time to become a vegetarian. This is the time to double down on protein and double down on weights and double down on your training and your ability to be strong and observe and fight back, run, escape, do whatever might be coming your way. So the idea that people are doubling down, we've been on a the American Dietetic Association, the standard American diet is a plant-based diet. It's highly plant-based. It's 70 to 85% plants. It's very little protein. It's very little meat. How's that working for everybody? We're so sick. Over 43% or something of our country is obese. That's insane. So I don't think the answer is to double down and say, well, I'm gonna go all the way plant. That 15% of protein I was eating, I'm gonna eliminate that too. That's gonna do it, because that's the part that's making me fat. Really? The part that actually gives you testosterone, builds bones. Hate to tell you, but this is red meat. I just don't understand where they come up with this. Like, you cut me open, I'm red meat, I'm cholesterol, I'm saturated fat. I am not carbs, I'm minerals. That's all I am. Red meat, minerals, and fat, animal fat. I'm animal fat. You know how hard it is to turn kale into a brain cell? It's almost insanely impossible. It's so many enzymatic chemical reactions that you've seen to try and do that. So I try to bring people into that. Like, can you just realize you're human? You're not a cow.
Yeah.
You know, but you can't, I guess, fight just complete lies and complete idiocy. I mean, people are going to make up a past that's not real, make up a reality of their own belief. What am I going to do? I don't know what to say. I'd hope people can learn to discriminate past those people and move on and get better. But there's going to be, I think, unfortunately, a lot of people who are not going to see it, and they're going to eventually kind of self-exterminate themselves. And it's heartbreaking, but I don't know what all we can do is keep doing what we're doing. And then one person's going to hear it and say, oh yeah, that does make sense. Oh yeah.
Well, I feel like there's a lot of people who are just, they're overweight, they're struggling, they don't feel good. Their doctor says you have to lose some weight, but doesn't tell them how. And then they think, okay, well, everybody, like, vegan is the healthiest thing to do, so let me try that. And it's just that they don't, they've never heard us.
Yeah.
And So
Funny,
and a
it's so
lot of
trendy
people,
again. It's funny, it's gotten
yeah.
so big again. I don't own a TV. I don't watch stuff. I try to stay out of, people say, oh, you watch. I'm like, I don't watch Netflix for my health information, you guys. Like you guys don't understand. That's all, like, most of that's going to be a lie. It's to make money, and it's to do, like, I'm just very into follow the money. I guess my distrust of large corporate America is so big and so deep for so long that I'm like, if they're telling you, if they're in bed with these massive, if the pharmaceutical and the American Medical Association, like, we know they're in bed with each other, we know they're funding things to get the answers they want. And if they're moving towards reducing the meat, allowing, even talking about restricting, all the more reason you should say, then it must be really important for me to have it. Like, if the bad guys are telling you it's not good for you, doesn't that clue you into something? Like, so that, to me, I mean, I just say follow the money. And what are the carnivores getting for telling you to eat meat? I mean, I've had people say, oh, because you're getting funded by big cattle. I'm like, I'm not sure who big cattle is, but they can feel free to fund me. I would love someone to fund me, right? Like, for all the free content I'm telling you and giving you and educating, right? Like, it's like, if you make appointments and I help you and I read your labs and I get you better and I, like, that's how I make a living. No one's funding me on the side. And, but what about the authors of that study? What about that company? What about the AMA? What about that Harvard professor? Oh, they got $100 grand last year for that, and they got a this, and they got a Mercedes, and that's just what we know of on record. You don't see the conflict of interest that every single buddy on that advisory board making all gets paid from the company that they're making the recommendation. I mean, come on. Like, the conflicts of interest and follow the money show you everything you need to know. I mean, who's more likely to be lying here? So,
well, I'm starting to worry about our access to meat, because I see, this whole concept of making lab grown meat and finding, sort of like using, I don't know, insects or whatever to make these alternative protein sources. And I feel like the idea is to, take the last level of, meat that can really be, or the last level of food that can be automated and controlled in such a way to, just, to make money and to take out the, the production from the local hands. So, I don't know how quickly that will happen, but I feel like that's definitely something on the horizon.
Yeah, I think it's something people can expect, and I think it's part of the plan to create, well, then I'll eat this other thing. So if you are in a position that you can get a large sum of meat from a local farmer and put it in a deep freezer, I would highly recommend everybody do that. I would, even if you don't have a freezer right now, maybe you have a friend that could share some of that meat with you, or at least also get to know those farmers, because we are having more distribution and supply issues. I think that that might get worse. And so there might not be meat in the grocery store, right? Just like, so if you don't, but your local farmer would have it. You might have to drive 30, 40 miles out to the country. But I know, like here in Atlanta, I mean, I can drive to many, many farms very, very close to me. And you make arrangements, like get eggs and ducks and chicken and meat and, like, quarter cow or this or that. So when things start, people need to kind of look at that. Go to like eatwild.com and you can find your local situations. Go meet some farmers. And maybe even if you're not ready to buy a quarter of a cow or half a cow right now, it's a smart idea to know ahead of time where things are, what's in case of that. And I say resist it and resist it and resist it. I am not looking to live in some matrix dystopian world where some protein slop comes out of a machine and there's your allotment for the day. And I'm supposed to say, yes, massa, thank you so much. I'm not trying to do that. So if good time to learn how to hunt. You don't know how to go get food, learn how to do it. I've never done it. I'm not a hunter. And being that I was vegetarian for so long, it's a wild idea. But as all of this year and a half has rolled out, I was like, oh, I talk a good game. But if I'm going to live primal, I think I may need to find a way to see the spirituality. And if I'm going to eat that life, am I willing to take that life and clean that life and prepare that life? And that's a tough one. I'm a very sensitive kind of empathic person. I'm like, oh, I used to, I was the kid that was bringing dead cats off the road and burying them in our backyard, right? So I'm like, ooh, I don't know if I can handle it. But I see it now, this spiritual connection, and like, you know, it's a burden that I'm letting someone else take that burden for me to feed me. So how dare I not be willing to do that? And so, and if times get hard, it's good to have some skills, because it's not real good if the only people who know how to survive are all the, Jim Bobs and Bubbas that I used to look down upon once upon a time, right? And now I'm like, oh, hunters, hi, you're my friends. Hi, how are you? And they give me venison and stuff, but I have a totally different appreciation. I used to be very judgmental. I was very discriminatory and didn't understand it. So I thought I should hate it. I was taught they were, kind of savage, kind of violent people. And it's so far from the truth. They're so connected to nature, way more than a city folk educated person like me, that I didn't understand. I'm like, what is that? Where do you think this meat comes from? And like, don't you understand what happens to make tofu for you? I'm like, no. Like, do you know how many animals died to what the field goes through? And when I saw it, my mind was blown. I think vegans just don't get it. We really think there's some magical world where the tofurkey, nothing had to die. I would love to live in a world where nothing had to die, but how would that actually function? Because everything's eating something that dies. The forest floor, the soil is soil because of the fungi, bacteria, and parasites that are eating the things that died and everything.
Well, the very earth is everything that's ever lived.
Yeah, it's all regenerating. We're all transmuting our energy and our minerals and bringing forth life. And so, you know what I mean? Like, I'm so grateful for that cow and that fish and I have the capability to transmute their life force into mine. And I do good, beautiful things in the world. So I don't feel guilty for that life. That life gives me life, and I go give life. And one day my life will be over and my life will be recycled. And then the grass will go in the grass and the cow will eat that. And somebody will be eating my life force through that cow. You know what I mean? It's all a part of it. And I think it's that deep disconnection from nature that vegetarians really get brainwashed. I was there a long time. They have the deepest disconnection from nature I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I have kept you on a really long time. I would love to, continue to pick your brain. And where should I tell, other Black carnivores to reach out to you? How can they contact you?
Yeah, my website is brainandbodysolutions.com, brainandbodysolutions.com, or drrimka.com. I have several monikers. That's my primary practice website. Like I said, I've been in practice over 20 years. I've had 4 or 5 brick and mortars. I closed my brick and mortars 3 years ago and went 100% virtual. And I'm still doing that. So I have patients all over the world. And I do functional medicine consulting with a strong emphasis on mental health things. And that ranges from learning disorders in children to adults with suicidal ideation. So I do see to Alzheimer's to Parkinson's. So ADHD, autism is a big mainstay of mine, even though we didn't talk about that. So any of that. So obviously I work on the diet, I work on the gut. You do not have to be a carnivore to see me. I don't take vegetarians anymore. However, I made that decision about 5 years ago. I refused to take, because I just can't do what I can do. I can't fix the brain that way. It doesn't mean I'll ease you into it. And just as a side note, Black Carnivore, I was having a really hard time with just everything, right? The world and practice and the frustration and watching more people become vegan. And I'm like, what am I going to do? How am I not good enough? I don't know how to get any better to teach them this. And right. I was having a really hard time. Like, I'm like, this is the hardest year and a half in practice of my life. And I was getting ready for my day, looking at my patients and like lining up, like preparing I kind of meditate and get ready for what's coming that day, usually the night before. And I was unsettled the night before because I saw that day and I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do with these people. I don't know how I'm going to help. I don't know how I'm going to help. Why do they even want to see me? Because I know they're vegetarians and we talked about it and they made another appointment and this and that. I'm like, they don't do what I say. So I'm having this appointment. I'm all stressed out. I'm like, I do not know how to help the SIBO situation. It's been a 7 to 10 year SIBO case. This guy's seen everybody, but he's vegetarian. I'm like, I can tell you I don't know how to get you better. So we get on the thing, second appointment. I said, okay, I'm going over. And I said, well, I've really been putting a lot of time in this. I put so much time trying to figure out what to do where I could help him because I love this guy and this family. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to try. He gets on and tells me for the last like 4 weeks, oh no, I started eating meat. I just went, what? Vegetarian 25 years. And based on me having an appointment with his son, and I'm like, kid's a vegetarian, hold on. I said, I'm gonna need you to change. Like, so family's trying. I'm like, please, let's start with protein. I'll use amino acids. The kid's starving though. Let's get protein. And the dad told me, I said, and he goes, I almost started crying. I was like, literally went, you don't know what you just did for my day. I go, I feel like I need to pay you right now. Like you just brought hope into my whole being. And he goes, I know I listened to everything you said and I know it was hard, but it's the only thing I eat that doesn't hurt. And I said, yeah. I said, and it was about 4 or 5 weeks now into it where I'm at a point now, I don't feel guilty. I feel good about it. He's like, I just realized I meant to be in this much pain. Like, can't be right. You know what I mean? Like there's something wrong. And I said, yeah, you're right. So when you have those breakthrough moments, it just takes one patient every now and then. And I'm like, okay. And I was so inspired. I'm like, what I do isn't pointless and worthless. I'm like, and it's not like I'm ever planning on him being a carnivore. This is a huge deal to bring nutrition back into this man's body. It's already changing. So that the change in the kind of husband and father he's going to be and man in the world, just not being in pain and distress and having to lay down all the time, and putting weight back on him. And it's going to be a totally different, what he's going to do to other people and how he impacts them. I was like, I've kind of done it. So that to say, there is hope when we can get a little bit of this and that, but in general, I'm not going to work with somebody who's committed to staying like a vegan. There's no way I can help you. It's too much mental gymnastics to try and figure that out. And I don't want to give you 87 supplements. It's just not, it's interesting to me. And that's what you have to do to a vegan. You think, well, I'm sorry, it's $1,000 later in supplements. You could just eat food, but whatever, right? So brainandbodysolutions.com. I have courses. I do private sessions. I have a retreat. I have a carnivore safari coming up in South Africa next year.
Wow.
Yeah,
God.
I have 5 spots left. You should come. I should tell you. Yeah, I'll have to give you that information.
Yeah,
because we were supposed to go before 2020 and then all hell broke loose. We had to, change it. And so my group decided, so it's only a total of 20 people going. So we have 5 spots left.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's a carnivore safari, South Africa, 10 days, not hunting, but it's experiential nature, all South African, private chef, private game reserve. It's going to be amazing. So I do all kinds of stuff. I see people, there's courses you can take with me and a safari. I thought I'd be doing a lot of them, but then again, and we've kind of said if we have to get a private jet at that point, we will. I mean, we're just, we're not, my kind of people are like, I said, I understand. I'm not either. So we'll work it out, Yeah.
All right. Absolutely. Okay. Well, thanks so much. And I look forward to having this opportunity to talk again.
Yeah,
Thank you.
awesome. Thank you. Thank you for what you're doing.
All
Keep
right.
going. Keep going.